At 0900 hours on October 19, 1944, Raoul Wallenberg stands at the Josef Varos railway station on the outskirts of Budapest. A deportation train is being loaded. Thought to 500 Hungarian Jews herded onto freight cars by Arrow Cross militia destination Auschwitz. Wallenberg walks along the platform distributing documents, Swedish protective passports, blue and yellow, with the three-crown emblem of Sweden. The documents are worthless legally. Sweden has granted no citizenship to these people. The passports carry no actual authority under international law, but they are printed on expensive paper with official-looking seals and stamps, and they work. The Arrow Cross guards hesitate. Are these people Swedish citizens? The passports say so. The guards check with their commanders. Wallenberg, wearing a Swedish diplomatic armband, demands that Swedish subjects be removed from the train immediately. He speaks perfect German, his tone absolute certainty. The guards relent. 67 Jews leave the train and board trucks Wallenberg has waiting. They will be driven to Swedish safe houses in Budapest, where they will join 35,000 other Jews living in buildings that are technically Swedish territory, despite being in Hungary. This scene repeats weekly through autumn and winter, 1944. Wallenberg appears at railway stations at the Danube embankment, where Jews are lined up for execution at death march assembly points. He distributes papers. He argues with German and Hungarian officials. He threatens war crimes prosecution. He bribes guards with cash, alcohol, and promises. In 6 months between July 1944 and January 1945, he issues approximately 20,000 protective passports and establishes 32 safe houses, sheltering 35,000 people. When Soviet forces liberate Budapest in January 1945, approximately 120,000 Jews survive, more than half the pre-deportation population, the highest survival rate of any European capital, except Sofia, Bulgaria. Wallenberg's operation saves tens of thousands. This is not disputed. What remains disputed is everything that happens after January 17, 1945, when Soviet Smersh agents arrest him on suspicion of espionage. He is never seen again. This is the story of how a Swedish businessman became a diplomat, how he created a fictional country of forged documents and rented buildings that somehow achieved diplomatic immunity, and how his success may have caused his death. It is also the story of how institutions fail, how Sweden abandoned him, how the Soviet Union imprisoned him, how the truth remains classified 70 years later. The mythology focuses on heroic rescue. The reality is more complex: bureaucratic improvisation, institutional cowardice, and a mystery that Cold War politics guaranteed would never be solved. Raoul Gustav Wallenberg is born August 4, 1912, in Stockholm. His family is among Sweden's wealthiest and most prominent. His grandfather, Gustav Wallenberg, is ambassador to Japan, Turkey, and Russia. His great-grandfather, Andrei Oskar Wallenberg, founds Stockholm's Enskilda Bank, which becomes the foundation of the Wallenberg business empire, controlling much of Swedish industry. Raoul's father, also Raoul Wallenberg, is a naval officer who dies of cancer 3 months before his son's birth. The child grows up surrounded by wealth and privilege, but also expectation. Wallenberg men achieve, they serve, they excel. He attends Nya Elementarskolan in Stockholm, an elite preparatory school. He is adequate, academically exceptional at languages. By age 16, he is fluent in Swedish, German, English, French, and conversational in Russian. This linguistic facility is genetic. His mother speaks 5 languages, his grandfather 7. The ability will prove crucial in Budapest, where negotiating with German SS officers, Hungarian Arrow Cross militia, Soviet military commanders, and Jewish community leaders requires linguistic versatility and cultural fluency that few possess. In 1931, he enters the University of Michigan to study architecture. The choice is deliberate. His family wants him abroad, exposed to American democracy and business culture. He graduates in 1935 with a degree in architecture, but never practices. The market for architects is poor during the Depression. He returns to Sweden, works briefly at a bank, then joins a Swedish trading company doing business in Central Europe. The company is owned by Kalman Lauer, a Hungarian Jew who increasingly cannot travel to Hungary as anti-Jewish laws tighten. Wallenberg becomes the company's international director, traveling to Hungary, regularly learning Hungarian, establishing business contacts. By 1942, he is spending months at a time in Budapest. He sees the deteriorating situation. He sees what the Germans intend. When Germany occupies Hungary on March 19, 1944, the situation becomes catastrophic. Adolf Eichmann arrives in Budapest with specific orders: deport all Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz. Between May 15 and July 9, 1944, Eichmann deports 437,000 Jews from provincial Hungary. The operation is extraordinarily efficient. Trains depart daily carrying 12,000 people, most going directly to the gas chambers. By early July, only Budapest's Jews remain approximately 230,000 people. Eichmann prepares their deportation. International pressure forces Hungarian regent Miklós Horthy to halt deportations on July 7th. This halt is temporary and fragile. Horthy is under German control, his government infiltrated by pro-Nazi elements. The American War Refugee Board, established in January 1944 to rescue European Jews, recognizes that Budapest's Jews require immediate intervention. The board's representative in Stockholm, Ivar Olsson, recruits Wallenberg for a rescue mission. The recruitment is deliberate. Wallenberg knows Hungary, speaks Hungarian and German, fluently has business cover that justifies travel, and comes from a prominent family, giving him social credibility. On June 19, 1944, Wallenberg accepts. On July 6, the Swedish Foreign Ministry appoints him attaché to the Swedish legation in Budapest. On July 9, he arrives by train. He has no diplomatic experience. He has 6 months. The Swedish legation in Budapest is already issuing protective passports when Wallenberg arrives. The practice began earlier in 1944 under Minister Carl Ivan Danielsson and diplomat Per Anger. Approximately 700 passports have been issued to Jews with Swedish connections, relatives living in Sweden, business dealings with Swedish companies, applications for Swedish citizenship pending. The passports identify bearers as Swedish subjects awaiting repatriation, thus protected under international law from deportation. The Hungarian government recognizes these passports reluctantly, but legally. The quota is 500. Wallenberg expands the operation dramatically. He argues that Sweden must issue passports more freely, protecting Jews regardless of actual Swedish connections. He bribes Hungarian officials to raise the quota to 4,500. He then ignores the quota entirely, printing 15,000 passports, or possibly more, accounts vary. The passports are increasingly fictional. Many recipients have no connection to Sweden. The passports are legal fictions, but they work because they appear official and because Wallenberg insists they are legitimate with absolute conviction. He redesigns the passport itself. The original version is a simple document typed on plain paper. Wallenberg commissions new versions printed in blue and yellow, Sweden's national colors, with elaborate borders, multiple stamps, and the three-crown Swedish emblem prominently displayed. He understands that the Germans and Hungarians respect visual authority. An impressive-looking document carrying official seals is harder to dismiss than typed paper. The redesigned Schutzpass becomes iconic. Thousands of Hungarian Jews owe their survival to a piece of elaborately decorated paper that has no actual legal standing but looks authoritative enough that gods hesitate before executing its bearers. The safe houses are more substantial. Wallenberg rents 32 buildings throughout Budapest, concentrating them near each other to create a Swedish district. He declares these buildings extraterritorial Swedish property, protected by diplomatic immunity under international law. This claim is legally dubious. The 1961 Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, which codifies embassy immunity, does not exist in 1944. Diplomatic immunity in 1944 is customary, not treaty-based, and typically applies only to embassy buildings and ambassador residences, not to rented apartment blocks. Wallenberg extends the principle aggressively. He affixes Swedish flags to building facades. He posts guards. He insists that Hungarian and German authorities cannot enter without Swedish permission. Remarkably, they comply. The buildings become sanctuaries. The capacity problem is severe. The buildings are designed to house perhaps 5,000 people total. Wallenberg packs in 35,000 floors. A building designed for 300 residents houses 2,000 burrows. People sleep in hallways, basements, stairwells. Sanitation is minimal. Food is rationed, conditions are miserable but survivable. Wallenberg's architecture degree proves relevant. He calculates maximum occupancy based on square footage, designs efficient sleeping arrangements, solves logistical problems that would defeat someone without technical training. He operates the safe houses like a housing project, which is what they are, emergency shelter for a besieged population. Financing the operation requires substantial funds. The American War Refugee Board provides $100,000, approximately $1.7 million in 2024 dollars. The World Jewish Congress contributes additional amounts. Wallenberg uses the money for bribes, building rentals, food purchases, and payroll. He employs over 300 people: drivers, clerks, guards, forgers, couriers. Most are Hungarian Jews working under Swedish protection. Some are Swedish citizens already in Budapest. The organization is improvised and chaotic. There's no formal hierarchy, no chain of command, no accounting system. Wallenberg makes decisions personally and immediately. This flexibility allows rapid response but creates vulnerability. If he is arrested, the entire operation collapses. The bribes are essential. Wallenberg pays Hungarian officials to accept Swedish passports. He pays Arrow Cross guards to ignore violations. He pays German officers to overlook irregularities. The amounts vary. Some guards accept small cash payments. Some demand alcohol, whiskey, and cognac become currency. Some require promises after the war. When the Germans lose, Wallenberg will testify that this officer behaved correctly, protected civilians, followed Geneva Conventions. These promises are often lies. The officers will face war crimes prosecution regardless. But the promises buy time. Time means survival. The Arrow Cross coup on October 15, 1944, escalates the crisis. Horthy is overthrown by Ferenc Szalasi, leader of the fascist Arrow Cross Party. Szalasi's government is fanatically anti-Jewish and fully subordinate to Germany. Deportation trains resume. Street executions begin. Arrow Cross militia roam Budapest, shooting Jews arbitrarily. The protective passports are revoked. Swedish safe houses lose their immunity. The carefully constructed protection system collapses overnight. Wallenberg responds immediately. He meets with Szalasi's foreign minister, argues that revoking Swedish protections violates international law, hints that Sweden might recognize the new government if it respects Swedish diplomatic property. The hint is empty. Sweden will not recognize Szalasi's regime, but it works. The passports are revalidated. The safe houses regain immunity. Wallenberg has traded diplomatic legitimacy for Jewish lives. The trade is morally dubious but practically effective. In November 1944, Eichmann organizes death marches. Jews forced to walk 200 kilometers to the Austrian border in winter weather without adequate food, clothing, or shelter. Thousands die during the marches. Wallenberg follows the columns in his car, distributing Schutz passes to marchers, pulling people out of the line, loading them into trucks, and transporting them back to Budapest. The operation is visible and brazen. Eichmann refers to Wallenberg as Judenhund Wallenberg, Jew dog Wallenberg. This is not a threat. This is a statement of fact. Eichmann recognizes what Wallenberg is doing and lacks the authority or motivation to stop him. The German military is collapsing. Soviet forces are approaching. Officers focus on survival, not ideology. If a Swedish diplomat wants to save Jews, that is Sweden's problem. By December 1944, Budapest is besieged. Soviet forces encircle the city. German and Hungarian forces defend from fortified positions. Artillery shells fall continuously. Food supplies dwindle. Civilians starve. The diplomatic corps evacuates. American, British, French representatives leave as Soviet forces approach. The neutral diplomats remain Swedish. Swiss, Spanish legations continue operating. Wallenberg stays despite opportunities to leave. His family in Stockholm sends telegrams urging his return. He refuses. The Jews under Swedish protection require his presence. If he leaves, the safe houses lose their immunity. People will die. On Christmas Eve 1944, Arrow Cross militia attack a Swedish safe house. They execute residents and dump bodies in the Danube. Wallenberg confronts the Arrow Cross commander, threatens war crimes. Prosecution demands the attacks cease. The commander ignores him. On December 25th, Wallenberg learns that German forces plan to destroy the Budapest ghetto, a walled district containing 70,000 Jews, before retreating. He drives to the headquarters of SS General August Schmidhuber, the garrison commander. He tells Schmidhuber that if the ghetto is destroyed, Wallenberg will personally testify at his war crimes trial. Schmidhuber countermands the order. The ghetto survives. This pattern confrontation threat success repeats throughout December and January. Wallenberg operates continuously, sleeping in different locations, nightly traveling in convoys for security, carrying forged documents, identifying him variously as Swedish, Swiss, or Hungarian, depending on which identity provides advantage. His car is bombed on December 29. He survives. Assassination attempts continue. Someone arrow-crossed Germans. Hungarian collaborators wants him dead. He continues operating. On January 13, 1945, Soviet forces reach eastern Budapest. Wallenberg seeks contact with Soviet commanders. He wants to discuss reconstruction, humanitarian relief, protection for Jewish refugees. He speaks minimal Russian. He has been studying but is not fluent. On January 16th, he meets Soviet officers who promise to escort him to Soviet headquarters in Debrecen to meet Marshal Rodion Malinovsky. Wallenberg believes this meeting will allow coordination of relief efforts. Friends describe him as optimistic, energetic, convinced liberation will bring order. On January 17, 1945, at approximately 0900 hours, Wallenberg and his driver Vilmos Langfelder depart Budapest under Soviet military escort. They are traveling to Debrecen. They never arrive. Instead, they are taken to Smersh headquarters. Smersh, Smert, Spionam, death to spies, is Soviet military counterintelligence. They arrest anyone suspected of espionage or collaboration. Wallenberg and Langfelder are detained. They are transported to Moscow. They are imprisoned in Lubyanka, the NKVD prison and interrogation facility. They are never seen free again. The reasons for Wallenberg's arrest remain disputed. Soviet documents declassified after 1991 provide fragments but not coherent explanation. One theory, Stalin's paranoia. The Soviet Union has just lost 27 million people defeating Germany. Stalin trusts no one, particularly Westerners operating in Eastern Europe. Wallenberg's connection to the American War Refugee Board flags him as potential spy. The board's Stockholm representative, Ivar Olsson, is also an Office of Strategic Services agent, the OSS being the CIA's predecessor. Soviet intelligence knows this. They suspect Wallenberg is an American intelligence asset. This suspicion is probably incorrect, but plausible enough to justify detention. Another theory, the Wallenberg family's business connections. The Wallenberg banking empire has extensive dealings with the Soviet Union since the 1920s. Stalin believes Sweden might provide post-war loans. Arresting Raoul Wallenberg, a prominent family member, provides leverage for negotiations. This theory explains arrest, but not prolonged imprisonment. Leverage is useless if never employed. A third theory, bureaucratic inertia. Smersh arrests thousands of foreigners in Eastern Europe during liberation. Most are processed, quickly interrogated, classified as collaborators or innocents, released or imprisoned. Wallenberg falls into administrative limbo. His case requires high-level review. Reviews take time. By the time senior officials notice Wallenberg has been imprisoned for months, releasing him requires admitting the arrest was error. Soviet bureaucracy does not admit errors. Wallenberg remains imprisoned. What is certain, Wallenberg is transferred to Lubyanka on January 21, 1945. He is held in cell 123 with Gustav Richter, a German police attaché. Guards interrogate him repeatedly. They do not torture him. Physically, accounts from cellmates confirm this, but interrogation is intensive. They could ask about his connections to American intelligence, his activities in Budapest, his sources of funding. They take no confession. They file no charges. On February 6, 1945, Soviet Deputy Foreign Minister Vladimir Dekanotsov notifies Sweden that Wallenberg is under Soviet protection. This notification implies he is free, merely being protected from German remnants. This is false. He is imprisoned. The Swedish government's response is inexcusable. Minister Staffan Söderblom, Swedish ambassador to Moscow, meets with Soviet officials to inquire about Wallenberg. Soderblom states on no evidence that he personally believes Wallenberg died in Budapest, killed by arrow cross or Germans. This statement undermines rescue efforts. It allows Soviet officials to claim Sweden believes Wallenberg is dead, thus no further inquiries are necessary. Why Soderblom makes this statement remains unclear. Some historians suggest incompetence. Others suggest deliberate policy. Sweden fears antagonizing the Soviet Union, which occupies territory adjacent to Sweden, and prefers maintaining good relations over rescuing one diplomat. In April 1945, the American State Department offers Sweden assistance in locating Wallenberg. The Swedish Foreign Ministry declines. This decision is not explained in available documents. The most likely explanation: Swedish neutrality requires balancing between superpowers. Accepting American help investigating Soviet imprisonment would align Sweden with the West against the Soviets. Sweden cannot afford this alignment. Wallenberg is sacrificed to neutrality. For 12 years, the Soviet government denies knowledge of Wallenberg's fate. Swedish inquiries receive evasive responses. No records exist. Perhaps he died during fighting in Budapest. The situation is unclear. In 1957, 2 years after Stalin's death, Soviet authorities release a document dated July 17, 1947, signed by A.L. Smoltsov, head of Lubyanka Prison Infirmary. The document states, "I report that the prisoner Wallenberg, who is well known to you, died suddenly in his cell this night, probably as a result of a heart attack or heart failure." The document is addressed to Viktor Abakumov, Minister of State Security. It orders cremation without autopsy. This document is the Soviet Union's official explanation. Wallenberg died July 17, 1947, of natural causes 2.5 years after arrest. The body was cremated. No evidence remains. The Swedish government accepts this explanation formally, but continues investigating informally. Prisoner reports contradict the official narrative. Multiple prisoners claim to have seen Wallenberg alive after 1947 in Lefortovo prison, in 1948 in Vladimir prison, in the 1950s, in Siberian camps, in the 1960s and 1970s. These reports are second-hand, unverifiable, sometimes contradictory. They create reasonable doubt that Wallenberg died in 1947. In 1989, Soviet authorities returned Wallenberg's personal belongings to his family passport, cigarette case, Hungarian currency, personal papers. They claim these items were found during routine archive reorganization. The timing, 1989 during Glasnost, when Soviet archives are partially opened, suggests calculated gesture rather than coincidence. The items confirm Wallenberg was imprisoned, but do not clarify what happened afterward. In 2000, Alexander Yakovlev, chairman of Russia's Rehabilitation Commission, announces that Wallenberg was executed in Lubyanka in 1947. Yakovlev cites conversations with Vladimir Khrushchev, former KGB chairman, who allegedly confirmed the execution. Khrushchev denies this. The announcement creates controversy, but no documentary evidence appears. If Wallenberg was executed, the execution order remains classified. In 2016, diaries of Ivan Serov, first KGB chairman, 1954-1958, are discovered hidden in walls of his Moscow home. The diaries state, "I have no doubts that Wallenberg was liquidated in 1947. Serov was deputy head of NKVD in 1947, responsible for Lubyanka operations. His diary provides credible testimony that execution occurred. But liquidated is vague. Executed by firing squad, poisoned, died under interrogation. The diaries do not specify. The most likely conclusion, based on available evidence, Wallenberg died in Soviet custody in 1947, either executed deliberately or killed during interrogation. The Smoltsov document is falsified cover story. The Soviet authorities' refusal to release autopsy results or execution orders is consistent with covering up illegal executions of foreign diplomat. The prisoner sightings after 1947 are either misidentifications or deliberate disinformation, but certainty is impossible. Russian archives remain partially classified. Documents that could resolve the question, interrogation records, execution orders, burial records, are either destroyed or sealed. In 2016, Sweden officially declared Wallenberg dead with official death date of July 31, 1952, 5 years after last credible evidence he was alive. This date is administrative convenience, not historical conclusion. The truth remains unknown. Between July 1944 and January 1945, Raoul Wallenberg issues approximately 20,000 protective passports and establishes safe houses sheltering 35,000 people. Other neutral diplomats conduct similar operations. Swiss diplomat Karl Lutz issues 50,000 protective letters. Spanish diplomat Angel Sanz Briz issues 2,500 Spanish passports. Italian businessman Giorgio Perlasca, posing as Spanish diplomat, issues approximately 5,000 documents. The collective effort saves approximately 120,000 Budapest Jews from deportation and execution. This is nearly 70% of the pre-deportation population and represents the highest survival rate of any major European Jewish community under Nazi occupation. Wallenberg's specific contribution is difficult to quantify precisely because operations overlap and documentation is incomplete. Conservative estimates credit him with saving 20,000 through passports and 15,000 through safe houses, totaling 35,000. More expansive estimates reach 100,000, arguing that his confrontations with German and Arrow Cross commanders prevented massacres that would have killed tens of thousands. Both estimates are defensible depending on how saved is defined. Direct documentary protection or broader prevention of mass executions. The question is academic to survivors. They lived. That is what matters. His methods forged documents, bribes, threats, bluffs would be unacceptable in conventional diplomacy. They violated Swedish diplomatic protocols. They exposed Sweden to German retaliation. They created precedents that complicated post-war diplomatic relations. Swedish foreign ministry officials were uneasy about Wallenberg's activities, according to contemporary reports. He jumped in with too big a splash. This unease is characteristic of institutions confronting individuals who achieve results through rule-breaking. Wallenberg saved lives by ignoring protocols that would have limited effectiveness. Swedish officials focused on maintaining neutrality and avoiding German anger, found his methods embarrassing. This institutional discomfort contributed to Sweden's weak response to his disappearance. If Wallenberg had been conventional diplomat following established procedures, Swedish government might have protested more forcefully. But Wallenberg was troublesome subordinate who succeeded through unauthorized methods. His disappearance was regrettable but not worth jeopardizing Swedish-Soviet relations. This calculation was morally bankrupt, but politically rational from perspective of Swedish government prioritizing national interest over individual citizen. Today, Raoul Wallenberg is commemorated extensively. He is honorary citizen of United States, Canada, Hungary, Israel, and Australia, one of few people to receive such multiple honors. He is designated righteous among the nations by Yad Vashem. Monuments and streets bear his name in dozens of cities worldwide. In 2012, U.S. Congress awards him Congressional Gold Medal posthumously. These honors acknowledge his achievements while obscuring institutional failures that caused his death. The Swedish government's conduct is particularly shameful. Ambassador Söderblom's 1945 statement that Wallenberg probably died in Budapest actively undermined rescue efforts. The Foreign Ministry's refusal of American assistance was cowardice disguised as neutrality. The 12-year delay before Sweden formally demanded Soviet explanation allowed evidence to be destroyed and witnesses to disappear or die. When truth finally emerged that Wallenberg was imprisoned and probably executed, Sweden accepted Soviet explanations without demanding accountability. No Swedish official faced consequences for abandoning Wallenberg. The institutional failure was complete. Soviet conduct was criminal. Arresting foreign diplomat without charges, imprisoning him without trial, probably executing him, then lying about his death for decades, violates every principle of international law and human decency. The Soviet Union faced no consequences. After 1991, Russia inherited Soviet legal obligations, but not Soviet accountability. Russian officials express regret, release partial documents, but never provide full accounting. The archives remain partly sealed. The full truth is withheld. The irony is bitter. Wallenberg spent 6 months saving Jews from Nazi genocide through improvised diplomacy and bureaucratic manipulation. He succeeded. He then became victim of Soviet paranoia and Swedish cowardice institutional failures that mirror the bureaucratic indifference that enabled Holocaust initially. The systems he manipulated to save lives failed to save his. This is not poetic justice. This is simply injustice compounded by institutional refusal to acknowledge it fully. At Budapest's Holocaust Memorial Center, a permanent exhibition documents the rescue efforts of neutral diplomats during 1944-1945. Wallenberg features prominently. His Schutzpass is displayed blue and yellow paper, three-crown emblem elaborate seals, signatures of Per Anger and Carl Ivan Danielsson. The document looks official and authoritative. 70 years later, it remains impressive. Standing before it, visitors understand why Hungarian guards hesitated. The paper looks important. It appears legitimate. That appearance saved lives. The safe houses still exist. Most are residential buildings occupied by ordinary tenants, unaware of the building's history. Small plaques mark some facades. In this building, the Swedish legation sheltered refugees during the German occupation, 1944-1945. The plaques are modest. Tourists photograph them without understanding significance. The buildings blend into urban landscape indistinguishable from neighboring structures, except for small brass markers testifying to temporary sanctuary. In Stockholm, the Raoul Wallenberg Institute for Human Rights and Humanitarian Law continues his mission. The institute conducts research, trains human rights professionals, advocates for victims of persecution. It is funded partially by Swedish government, the same government that abandoned Wallenberg. The funding is guilt money, institutional attempt to compensate for past failure. It cannot restore Wallenberg's life or recover the decades he might have lived had Sweden acted decisively in 1945. His grave does not exist. His body was cremated in Moscow, assuming Soviet authorities' account is accurate, and ashes were not preserved or returned. No physical remains exist to bury. In 2007, a memorial was dedicated at Stockholm's Norra Begravningsplatsen Cemetery. The memorial is symbolic cenotaph bearing his name and dates 1912-1947. The date of death is the official Soviet claim accepted by Sweden for lack of alternatives. Whether he actually died in 1947 or survived into the 1950s, 1960s, or later remains unknown. The memorial commemorates absence, not presence. It marks loss, not recovery. His family maintained hope for decades. His mother, Maja Weising, led campaigns demanding Soviet accountability until her death in 1979. His half-sister, Nina Lagergren, continued the effort until her death in 2016. They never accepted Soviet explanations. They believed Raoul might be alive in Soviet prisons or camps. They demanded evidence. They received evasion. They died without answers. This is perhaps the cruelest aspect. Families of the disappeared suffer permanent uncertainty. They cannot mourn conclusively. They cannot achieve closure. The disappeared haunt the living, neither confirmed dead nor proven alive, existing in liminal state that denies both grief and hope. For Hungarian Jews, Wallenberg saved, his disappearance is particularly painful. They survived because he intervened. He disappeared because he intervened. The connection is causal. Had he not gone to Budapest, had he not conducted aggressive rescue operations, had he not attracted Soviet suspicion, he might have survived the war. His death, if he is dead, resulted directly from his success. The survivors carry this knowledge. Some feel guilt. Some feel obligation to honor his memory. All feel loss. The man who saved them could not save himself. The injustice is profound and irreparable. On January 17, 1945, when Soviet officers escort Wallenberg from Budapest, he believes he is meeting Marshal Malinovsky to discuss reconstruction. He is optimistic. His mission succeeded. Jews survived. The war is ending. Rebuilding can begin. He takes personal belongings, tells friends he will return within days. He does not return. This moment, departure for meeting, that is actually arrest, crystallizes the tragedy. Wallenberg succeeded as diplomat precisely because he trusted his judgment and took risks that conventional diplomats avoided. He issued forged documents, he bribed officials, he threatened powerful enemies, he survived assassination attempts, he saved tens of thousands. His success depended on audacity, confidence, improvisation. These same qualities made him vulnerable to Soviet paranoia. A conventional diplomat following established protocols might have been ignored by Smersh. Wallenberg, conducting unauthorized rescue operations funded by American agency, appeared suspicious. His success made him target. The counterfactual is haunting. If Wallenberg had evacuated Budapest in December 1944 when other diplomats left, he would have survived. Thousands of Jews under Swedish protection might have died, but Wallenberg would have lived. This trade, his life for their lives, was not consciously chosen. He stayed because leaving was unthinkable. The Jews needed protection. He provided it. The decision was moral, not strategic. He paid for it with decades of imprisonment or immediate execution, depending on which account is credited. History remembers Wallenberg as hero. This is accurate but incomplete. He was also improviser, rule-breaker, institutional irritant who achieved results through methods that embarrassed his superiors. He created fictional country Sweden in Budapest that existed only on paper and in rented buildings, but functioned effectively as sanctuary. He manipulated diplomatic protocols to serve humanitarian purposes. He succeeded because he ignored constraints that would have limited conventional diplomats. The institutions he worked with, Swedish Foreign Ministry, War Refugee Board, Jewish relief organizations, benefited from his success while disapproving his methods. After his disappearance, these institutions memorialized him while refusing to acknowledge their own failures. Sweden built monuments without admitting its government abandoned him. United States honored him without explaining why War Refugee Board did not press harder for his release. Jewish organizations praised him without interrogating whether more could have been done to rescue him. This selective memory is characteristic of institutional commemoration. Heroes are honored, institutional failures are obscured. Wallenberg becomes symbol of individual courage, while systems that failed him escape accountability. The memorials testify to his achievements. They do not testify to Swedish cowardice, Soviet criminality, or American indifference that allowed his disappearance to remain unresolved. 79 years after his arrest, the mystery persists. Russian archives remain partly sealed. Documents that could provide answers if they exist are withheld. The families who might demand accountability are gone. Wallenberg's mother and sister died decades ago. No living relatives have standing to pursue answers aggressively. The case fades into history, another victim of World War II, another disappeared person whose fate remains officially unclear. What remains certain: Raoul Wallenberg arrived in Budapest July 9, 1944. He conducted rescue operations until January 17, 1945. He saved tens of thousands of lives. He was arrested by Soviet authorities. He disappeared. He likely died in Soviet custody, executed or killed through neglect. His body was cremated or buried in unmarked grave. The truth was suppressed for political reasons by governments that should have protected him. He deserved better. The Jews he saved deserved to see him survive. His family deserved truth. They received evasion lies and performative honors that could not restore what was taken: his life, their closure, the possibility of justice. On blue and yellow paper with 3 crowns and elaborate seals, Raoul Wallenberg built a country that existed only in documents but saved real lives. That country disappeared when he disappeared. The papers remain in museums, testifying to fiction that became reality for people who survived because bureaucrats believed official-looking documents. This is Wallenberg's legacy, proof that authority is often performance, that legitimacy can be created through confidence and good design, and that sometimes a well-made forgery matters more than law. He forged documents and saved lives. History remembers the lives. It forgets or refuses to acknowledge fully that he died for saving them, and that the institutions praising him today abandoned him when it mattered.